Okay, great. Welcome back to day 3 of the research colloquium. Today's topic will focus on holistic approaches to success. And we know success can, always is our driver in life, right? We want to be successful in whatever we do. And there are techniques to make us optimize our probability of success. And so Dr. Frederick, who works here at Aspen in the Center for Graduate Studies, she has a tremendous amount of background in this exact topic today, which is helping you reach your potential and your greater impact by paying attention to, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, the vagus nerve, and how you can tap into that and really reach a different level of performance that you might not realize you can reach. So Dr. Frederick, I'm going to get out of the way and you can take over.
Okay, Kevin, thank you so much. And I am so excited to be here today for this interactive presentation on one of my all-time favorite topics. I call it the vagus nerve, but Kevin, vagus, Vegas, potato, potato, it's the same thing. The title of today's talk is You Can't Pour from an Empty Cup. Tone your vagus nerve and upgrade your teaching practice. And I'd like to start with a couple of questions. So if you are close to your chat box and you want to interact with me there now or throughout the presentation, I always think it's a lot more fun when we've got some interaction. As an educator, have you ever wondered why sometimes grading feels more like a chore than a hobby? Or maybe, especially lately, you've been experiencing this situation of resistance and you've been asking yourself, why is it so difficult for some of my students to receive my feedback? Or you wake up a little tired and you're wondering, why did something that used to inspire and energize me just tire me out? So the problem that I want to talk to you about today is teachers who are stressed out and students who are disengaged and resistant to feedback. Now, clearly, these are concepts that have been researched for quite some time, but they've been getting a lot of increased interest post-pandemic. And as this presentation unfolds, I think it'll be clear why that's the case. The solution that I want to offer you today is the understanding and application of the polyvagal theory. And I'd love to just stop here and ask, is anyone familiar with the polyvagal theory? And if you want to type that into the chat box, it's always helpful for me to know who's on the call and who has experience with this theory. The vision that I would love to create with you today is one of, I'm sorry, something's going on with my computer, a thriving collaborative classroom experience that leaves you energized. So let's go over the learning objectives. By the end of this presentation, you will understand the relationship between trauma and chronic stress, your autonomic nervous system, I'm going to call this the ANDS, and your experiences, both inside and outside the classroom. You'll be able to describe the basic components of the polyvagal theory, compare the historical view of the ANDS to the contemporary one, gain a better understanding of all human behavior through the use of the polyvagal theory, and last but not least, my favorite part, you are going to learn and experience 3 vagal toning exercises. So just a little bit about myself. I'm currently residing in Arizona. I love face-to-face meetings. So if you're my neighbor, let's meet up. I have my degree from Brandeis University, where I was involved in a lifespan development lab, and specifically my research focused on successful aging. So I have a past of being interested in health and wellness. I've been involved in higher education for quite some time now, and specifically I work with doctoral programs. For the first half of my career, I was really engaged in the creation of knowledge through research, but I have found that especially lately, I'm really interested in taking research and applying it to the human experience. So on that note, I could sit here and bore you with research around this first activity called the humming breath. But instead, I would like to invite you to just participate along with me. So this breath is like it sounds. We're going to be taking an inhale, and on the exhale, humming it out. Now, if you're in a situation where it's not appropriate for you to be making some noise, I understand. You can do this later, but the cool thing about your vagus nerve is it will co-regulate with others around you. So if you're in a situation where you can't play along, I'm going to ask that you play along to the extent that you let me hum you. All right, so you'll want to get in a comfortable position. Check to see if your legs are crossed, and if they are, uncross them. Maybe you feel them firmly planted on the ground, or yourself kind of melting into whatever surface that's supporting you. If you feel safe to do so, I invite you to close your eyes. And we are going to take about 3 humming breaths here. You can hum along with me or hum at your own pace. Don't worry about following me exactly. All right. So check to make sure that your teeth are not touching. That ensures that your jaw is relaxed, and we'll take a nice deep breath in through the nose and then hum it out. Again, a nice deep breath in, filling up your belly, your sides, and your back, and then letting it go. One more time, the deepest breath you've taken all year. Hum it out. Just rest for a moment in that vibration. And let me ask you, what feeling would you like to invite into your life, into your classroom? Maybe it's empathy, joy, patience, whatever word comes for you. Breathe that word in. Ask yourself, what does my body feel like when I have more of that? And give yourself permission to feel that. One more nice, luxurious, collective breath in, letting it go. Introducing some movement back into the body, maybe a tapping of your toes, a rolling of your wrists. When you're ready, blinking your eyes open. And if you'd like to share your experience or share the word that came for you in the chat box, please feel free to do so. If we think of our classrooms as a microcosm of society, or really any workplace as a microcosm of society, there's really no surprise, and I think we all agree, that we see an increase of things like chronic disease, negative emotional states like depression and anxiety, increased rates of things like PTSD and addiction. And these can all be traced back to root causes of trauma and chronic stress. The mechanism through which trauma and chronic stress create these systems is through a dysregulated nervous system. And I see some things in the chat, so I just want to, if people are feeling calm, the ability to focus, all great things to have as an educator in a classroom or a student in a classroom, right? So what can happen is that the nervous system can become dysregulated. So I want to take just a second here to do a quick review of the nervous system. Maybe you're having a flashback of your high school biology class or a college physiology class. The focus for today's presentation is on the autonomic branch. Remember, I'm calling that the ANDs. These are things that are associated with involuntary human functions, things that you don't have to think about, but that happen naturally for you, like digestion, regulating your body temperature, your heartbeat. This branch of your nervous system is responsible for keeping us alive, right? It has a focus on survival. I'm going to put in my mouse here and see if this helps with clicking these slides forward. So if we think about your ANDs, what it is a compass that is helping you navigate the world. It is constantly scanning the environment for cues. These are cues that are going to determine, am I in danger or am I safe? And it's going to act accordingly. Here's the kicker, and this is such an important part. This is happening through something called neuroception. Neuroception is a fancy word for things below your consciousness, things that you're not thinking about. It's outside our brilliant, wonderful human mind as we think of it. Your ANDs is doing this below your conscious awareness, and it's deciding, am I in danger or am I safe? And your body is responding accordingly. So let's just pause for a moment and think about what the world has been through in the last couple of years, because what can happen is your ANDs can get stuck. And then this detection system becomes faulty. What do I mean? I mean that your ANDs can detect danger when there is none and act accordingly. So here's an example. Maybe you're having a meeting with some colleagues, some other teachers, totally benign meeting. Or maybe you're giving some really great supportive feedback to a student, but your colleague or the student is feeling threatened. They may be feeling threatened because their ANDs is dysfunctional, it's dysregulated. This is a short list. I really cut this down to get it into 2 slides of things you, your loved ones, your students may experience when your ANDs isn't functioning the way it was meant to function. So neck, shoulder, back pain, anyone? Feelings of anxiety or fatigue. When we think about factors that are important to a classroom or a learning experience, memory issues, unreasonable distrust, difficulty in collaboration, the list goes on and on. Now, if we want to work towards resolving these issues at the root, then we need to understand the ANDs and how to regulate it. So what I'd like to do is remind you of the way you were probably taught about the ANDs, and certainly this is how I taught it when I taught a college physiology course. I taught there were 2 circuits, a parasympathetic, fight, flight, or freeze, a sympathetic, fight, flight, or freeze, and a parasympathetic, rest and digest. Is this sounding familiar to anyone? Further, the vagus nerve was taught, but it was taught as one nerve that was part of a cranial system. In this system, we used to say, hey, when one is active, the other is not. So you're in one or the other. It was a very binary system. And further, we tended to really promote parasympathetic. This is where you want to be in rest and digest. And for goodness sake, don't get stuck in sympathetic. That's the bad one. But then came along Dr. Stephen Porges. Dr. Porges is currently at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And in 1994, he proposed the Polyvagal Theory. What this theory allows us to do is really understand any human behavior. I will tell you guys, once I discovered the polyvagal theory, I would have light bulb moment after light bulb moment. There wasn't anything that any person or myself did or any situation out in the world that I couldn't explain once I understood this theory. It also allows for the creation of techniques that promote resilience, this trait that as a human we need, especially now. And again, we'll be doing 3 of them together on the presentation today, but I'll give you a whole laundry list of other things that you can be doing to tone your vagus nerve. And for those of you interested in embodied trauma, if we have any Bessel van der Kolk fans out there, the polyvagal theory really helps you understand how you can release this trauma. So the new way, something that I'm going to offer up for you to consider today in terms of understanding the autonomic nervous system is that the vagus nerve is conceptualized now with 2 pathways, ventral and dorsal. So you'll see that now the freeze is broken out. Instead of fight, flight, or freeze, we think of freeze as its own circuit. And we've got this ventral vagal component that is often termed or described as tend and befriend. It's a social engagement circuit. We still have the sympathetic, fight or flight. But what's happening here with these 3 circuits is that your ANS is now detecting safety. Am I safe? Remember, this is happening below your conscious awareness. Am I in danger? Or is my life threatened? The beauty of this theory, of this model, of this way of explaining our human experience and our human emotion is that these 3 circuits allow for 5 states. And I think we can all agree that old binary model, while it could be helpful, it really didn't explain a lot of what we are experiencing as humans. With these 5 states, we've got that circuit number 1, social engagement. Circuit number 2, that sympathetic, that fight or flight, which if you think about this is being mobilized, but with fear, right? You're either going to fight off whatever this danger is, or you're going to flee from it. And the dorsal vagal circuit, which is the freeze, you're immobilized with fear. And the example that's given a lot in the literature for a demonstration of this is if a cat catches a mouse, the mouse will often feign that it's dead and go limp in its mouth. That's an example of dorsal vagal activation. But what this model allows for are 2 hybrid states that are really optimal for human functioning, especially in the classroom. The first is a combination of circuit 1 with circuit 2. So what happens when you combine social engagement with your sympathetic chain? You now have mobilization without fear. Mobilization without fear. And we're going to dig deeper into these in just a moment. The second hybrid, ventral, you're experiencing right now. Now, before we dig deeper into these things and how they can present in your classroom, and we'll probably get into discussion about how it presents outside the classroom as well, I want to give you this image of where these circuits are located anatomically in your body. So the ventral circuit is shown here in blue, the dorsal in red, and I know it's a little hard to see the sympathetic chain in yellow. It's essentially going up and down your spinal cord. All right, guys, so here's the thing. As humans, we love to think that our brain runs the show, right? And that our brain is saying to our body, hey, listen, there's no reason I should have butterflies in my stomach. I shouldn't be nervous, or I'm not feeling great. I'm going to think myself happy. And sometimes that might work, but a lot of times it doesn't. And the reason for that is because this is very much a bottom-up system, meaning these circuits are feeding information to your brain way more than your brain is feeding information to them, and a lot more. 80 to 90% of the messages are coming from the bottom up. All right, so I've hit you with a lot of information. So let's do a quick review. In the old way of thinking about the autonomic nervous system, we've got this thing called the vagus nerve. There's one pathway. Stephen Porges invites us to think about this vagus nerve as having two pathways. So this allows us to move from just these two circuits, this kind of on-off system, to three circuits. No longer do we have to just categorize human behavior in, are you stressed or are you resting? Because now we have 5 states that we can consider and use to explain what's going on in our classroom, and really use it to explain what the heck's going on in the world right now. So let's take a closer look. If we focus in on this ventral vagal component, what do we see? This is again, shown here in blue. It's the social engagement system, often termed tend and befriend. Anatomically, cranial nerve number 10. It is associated with vocalizations, eye contact, and facial expressions. So let's just pause for a moment. We've got 3 things that the ANS is really relying on for cues to determine, am I safe? Am I safe? If we cover up most of this landscape, vocalizations and facial expressions, and by the way, a really important part, I don't know if you're viewing your computer and you can see me, but a very important part of the muscles that your ANS is using to detect or write in this area. It might start making sense why we have these increased incidences of trauma and chronic stress, especially lately. When your ventral vagal circuit is activated, when it's online, that's when you're going to experience things like positive relaxation, being in the present moment, and emotions like joy, love, and happiness. And who couldn't use more of that? So I'm going to invite you to play along with me as we engage in our second exercise that is going to activate your ventral vagal circuit. I call it the recalibration practice. This is Rosenberg's, what he terms the basic practice. But a large part of this talk today is something I helped a Rolfer create for continuing education class. If you're not familiar with the term Rolfer, it's a type of body work that works with the fascia. And together we created a trauma-informed continuing education class for body workers. And he termed this practice recalibration. And I really liked that because I think you will experience a recalibrating of your body. All right, so you ready? The first thing we're going to do is slowly and gently move your head from right to left. And as you're doing this with care, I want you to notice your range of motion. How far can you go? And I also want you to notice sensations. Do you feel tenderness? I know I almost always have some snap, crackle, and pops happening. Okay, so everyone's got their baseline. Now, the most important part of this practice is that you're going to attempt to keep your head facing forward, and I'm going to ask you to move your eyes. Your head's going to want to go with where your eyes are. So your job is to try to keep your head facing forward. So if you're facing the computer screen, you're going to do what you can to keep your nose facing forward. Sometimes it helps if you interlace your fingers and hold them behind your head and really hold your head forward. But if that's not comfortable for you, maybe goalpost your arms so that you have a hand out here to the right and to the left. Okay, so here we go. Head facing forward. I want you to look to the right. So do your best to keep your head forward and pull your eyes as far to the right as they can go. Looking at your elbow or maybe your fingers, keeping that head forward. It may feel uncomfortable, that's okay. You're just pulling your gaze to the right. And what we're looking for here is a shift in your breath. That can come as a sigh or as a yawn. But if you do this in a group or you don't feel that shift, 5 breaths is usually sufficient. And we've done that. So you're going to blink your eyes forward. Now you're going to look in the other direction. So if you were playing along with me, now you're looking to the left. So pulling your eyes, looking to your left elbow, maybe your fingers, that side of the room. We're looking for a shift in your breath. Sometimes a shift comes in an upsurge of peristalsis, which is just a fancy name for tummy rumblings. And again, if you don't detect a shift, no problem. We just hang out for about 5 breaths. And we've done that. So go ahead and blink your eyes forward. Relax your arms. And now move your head from right to left, slowly and gently, and see if you don't experience an increase in the range of motion and a change in whatever feelings you may have had before. And if you want to share that in the chat box, please feel free to do so. Basically, what we just did was released tension on cranial nerve number 10 by using your occipital muscles. That's the recalibration practice. It's a great thing to do first thing in the morning. And I have found, especially if you're lying on your bed, it's a lot easier to keep your head moving forward. And Kevin says he could feel the tightness released. Yeah, I love that one because I actually have yet done it. I have yet to do it with anyone who doesn't feel something. And so it's just a great way to show people, yes, these are practices that really do physiologically make a difference. So let's move on to that other circuit, the sympathetic circuit. When your ANS is detecting danger is when this one will be brought online. Again, this one's shown here in gold or yellow. It's running down the length of your spinal cord. Anatomically, it is supporting all the organs and the muscles that you need when you are threatened. If your sympathetic nervous system, is online, if that circuit is being activated, this is when you're going to experience things like anxiety, aggressiveness, frustration, things I think we could all agree, they're not beneficial at any time, but particularly in a classroom environment. If we look at that last circuit, the dorsal vagal, this is activated when your ANS, remember, not your brain, not you feeling threatened, but when your ANS is detecting a life-threatening situation. This is shown here in red, also cranial nerve number 10, but this is primarily attached to subdiaphragmatic viscera. So have you ever had a situation where you have a gut feeling, or maybe you've got those butterflies or a feeling of anxiety and panic, and your mind says, there's no reason I should be feeling this. This is confusing to me. Again, I want you to remember this system is feeding information up. It's not the other way around. So when this system is activated, we're going to have those feelings like disassociation, helplessness, depressed mood. Again, not optimal anywhere in any job or any situation, but especially in a classroom. Now, here's the cool thing that the polyvagal theory allows us to think about, and that is the combining of these states. So in the polyvagal literature, when we're combining the ventral with the sympathetic circuit, they'll often define this as play. So if you think about that, when you are in friendly play or even in competitive sports, your body is active, you are mobilized, but you're not acting out of fear. When I think about how combining sympathetic and ventral in a classroom could appear, it could appear through experiential learning exercises, active collaboration. So again, if we go back to, okay, here I am as an educator, or here is my classroom, virtual or face-to-face, and I'm sensing a lot of stress, a lot of panic. How can I now layer in the ventral vagal circuit? How can I bring that online before we engage in this experiential activity or this active collaboration so that people can perform optimally? Similarly, You can have a combination of ventral and dorsal. In the polyvagal theory, they commonly term this intimacy. And so if you think about a situation where maybe you're sitting immobile on the couch, cuddling with your children, this would be an example of your social engagement system being activated as well as your dorsal. So when we think about a classroom situation, you may have students that are kind of checked out, disassociating, not really present. And one way that you could potentially improve this situation is by bringing that ventral vagal online so that they're in a situation where they can be listening, learning actively in a state of feeling safe. So hopefully, again, that's the state that you all are experiencing now during this presentation, a combination of feeling connected with colleagues on this call, with other humans who are interested in this type of thing, but you're immobile. So I'm a visual person. What I'd like to do is contrast the old way of thinking with the ands with the new way for you. Remember, we had that very simple black, white, good, bad system. And Dr. Porges's polyvagal theory opens up the idea that we may have 3 circuits that allow for those 2 really optimal hybrid states. So if we think about our nervous system as having these 3 circuits, so here I've got the sympathetic in yellow, the ventral in blue, and the dorsal in red. The goal is not to always be driving in the blue lane. That's not the goal, because that's not life, right? A truly resilient human is going to be able to move with agility and in a very fluid way through these different circuits. That's what we're aiming for. Now, my hope is that many of you, and I see some of the same names, that you attended the presentation on Monday with Dr. Nina Beeman, who I saw here today, and Jennifer Kell, who talked about the neurobiology of happiness. Because you're probably not going to be surprised to see that some of the things here that I offer up as vagal toning exercises are ones that they talked about. Dancing, moving your body, right? Yoga would be another one. Singing, anything that creates that vibration in that part of your body, chanting, toning, humming. Being in nature is a big one. Creating art, any sort of artistic expression. Gratitude practices are vagal toning exercises. Connecting with others is a huge one. There's something called co-regulation. Dr. Nina Beeman brought this up in her talk last fall. When we are around people who are stressed and anxious, we feel worse. When we are around people who are calm and attuned, we feel better. A classroom is a situation where you've got a number of people together. And so understanding the autonomic nervous system, understanding how you can tone the vagus nerve in a group setting or offer practices individually. Last spring, Steve Peterson also talked about some mindfulness practices that he was using in his classroom with great results. Now, I can imagine you sitting there going, Heather, this all sounds great, but either myself, someone I love, or some students in my class, listen, there's no amount of dancing, singing under the moonlight, barefoot on the grass that's going to get their ands unstuck. Hey, it happens. There are a lot of trauma-informed therapies out there. And again, I'm going to encourage you to go back to that talk on Monday because they really dug deep into options that are out there for you if you need help getting unstuck. There are also, now I will let you know, disclosure here, I have not investigated these, I have not done research on these, but there are both external and internal ventral vagal toning vibrating devices. The external one goes on your ear. The internal one is medically embedded and it acts like a pacemaker does to the heart. So something else that maybe would be of interest to you. But before we move to the question and answer period, I would love to just engage in one more exercise with you. And this one is called the 2-4-8 breath. Breath is a big one. And I know earlier when we did the humming breath, I asked you to get calm and relaxed. Close your eyes if you wanted to, if you could. And certainly you can do that here, even placing your hands on the center of your chest. But what I want to really impress upon you is the breath is very powerful, and you don't need to wait until you can chill out to do it. You don't need to schedule time in on your calendar and be in a meditative state. You can do this exercise while you're reading your emails, while you're grading a student paper, while you're sitting in traffic, while you're cooking dinner. So the 2, 4, and the 8 stand for the number of counts you will hold for your inhale, a hold, and an exhale. About. All right, so don't get hung up on the numbers. Really, what's most important is that you're breathing at a cadence that's comfortable for you. But the 2 is a very quick inhale. So you're flooding your body with oxygen. It's going to get that sympathetic online. Hold for about 4 seconds. And then that long exhale, that about 8 count exhale, is going to send a signal that everything's okay. So let's do a practice one. It's going to be an inhale, a hold, and then a long exhale. And we'll do it again. So again, if you want to get comfortable, close your eyes, feel free. Otherwise, just do it along with me. Here we go. Inhale, hold, exhale. Inhale, hold, let it out. One more time. Inhale, hold, slow exhale. That is a great vagal toning exercise. Just takes a couple minutes. You can truly do it anywhere. If you tone your vagus nerve, you have a regulated nervous system. When we have a regulated nervous system, we experience things like happiness, resilience, feeling connected, a vibrant and healthy life. So let's revisit that problem that I posed earlier on in today's presentation. At this point, I hope you agree with me that the problem can really be distilled into this: humans with dysregulated nervous systems. The solution? A toned vagus nerve. The vision, and this is something that I do when I'm taking a walk out in the sunshine and I'm humming along with the birds in the trees, I think about what the world would look like if we taught people, if we educated people about their ands, about how to tone their vagus nerve in the same way we teach them grammar and basic arithmetic. Because I believe if we did that, we could create, call me utopian, an inclusive, safe world that is filled with resilient people who enjoy living their life purpose. And I love to just send that vibration out into the universe. And if that resonates with you, maybe while you're doing your vagal toning exercises, you'll feel compelled to do the same thing. So if we apply the polyvagal theory to your life and we go back to those questions I started the talk with, how come sometimes my job feels more like a chore than a hobby? I became an educator because my why is to inspire. And darn it, I spend so much time providing this supportive, positive feedback. I use the sandwich technique, but students don't want to hear it. And why don't I jump out of bed excited that this is my job, that this is my life? Why, especially lately, do I feel so tired? It really all comes down to all the answers are related to how your nervous system is functioning. So now you have the key, because you have a deeper understanding of how your ands and your students' ands, any human's ands works, and also how to regulate it. I do want to say, if anything that I said to you today, anything that you heard perked your interest, please check out polyvagalinstitute.org. They have an amazing archive of resources. The books that I drew heavily on for today's talk are both Stephen Porges's The Pocket Guide to the Polyvagal Theory and Stanley Rosenberg's Accessing the Healing Power of the Vagus Nerve. So on that note, I'm going to stop my share so I can see the chat box. And Kevin, open it up to questions, dialogue, conversation.
Yeah, I don't want to be the first one to jump in, but first of all, I do want to say thank you, Heather. You make this stuff look so easy. I mean, you do such a fantastic job of how you deliver the content, and you have these practice activities and how you explain the reasoning behind it. That was very enjoyable to not only to do what you just had us do, and unfortunately we don't do enough of that in our day. Sorry, I need to turn my camera on too. We don't do enough of that during the day, and then when we do it, and I often think that we don't do these things because we say, well, I don't have time for that. But the interesting thing is, once you do it, you will make time for it, because you realize how beneficial it is. And it's all about balance. I mean, I think that was your key point. If you're fighting and flighting and freezing, something happened where you're not in balance. And the goal almost of everything is homeostasis, right? And no matter what you consider, it can be civilization, right? It can be our bodies, it can be our relationships. There's a homeostatic sort of, state that you seek, which is balance. And when we're out of balance, things become unhealthy. So I really believe that this was super relevant to me as well, Heather, because I believe what happens through our days is the stressors. You mentioned people are stressed out and they're disengaged and maybe even resistant to feedback about change. Is we got to deal with life, first of all, right? And then we neglect dealing with ourselves and healing ourselves daily. It can't be wait till you get sick and then go heal yourself. What you talked about is very proactive, I feel. And we often are reactive, right? I'm stressed today. I had a really bad day. I screamed at my spouse, or I yelled at my child or something, right? Because we weren't monitoring, which is, I think, the benefit of where I felt the most benefit to me, and which I feel I don't always monitor enough, is awareness. You brought an awareness of how I was breathing. You brought to me an awareness of how tense or stressed my neck was, right? You brought an awareness of how my feet felt on the ground and how my body felt in the chair. Most of the day, I'm not aware. I'm not aware that I'm getting tight and tense. It's happened so slowly. It's that whole frog scenario in the water, right? But with you, I believe by practicing these particular activities, and again, your title said to tone, right? You got to tone it. You got to tone your vagus nerve. I like that. Vegas actually sounds better than like Las Vegas, right? I'll remember that one. But anyway, that's a different kind of vagus nerve there. But you got to tone it, and you tone something by exercising it, right? You don't get toned by going to the gym one day and lifting some dumbbells and saying that's enough. You got to lift the dumbbell every day, and your vagus nerve is no different. And I really appreciate how you helped us understand why we feel these ways sometimes. And I believe being aware of the state that you're in really is a powerful benefit of this. It's not always necessarily what you're doing, but it's realizing what state my body is currently in and realizing, is that state healthy? And if it's not, here are some activities that I can do to help me recenter back to my state of homeostasis that I need, right? In order to be more optimal and successful in life, not only in job, but outside and everything else that we have to do. If you're not aware of the state that you're in, it's hard to redirect that into a positive state if you're typically in a negative state. Go ahead, Heather.
Oh, I was just going to say, recognition is such an important part. And I think it really ushers in a trait of empathy, both for yourself and for others. And I would love to live in a world where instead of people saying, stop being such a jerk, or gee, you're so stressed out, they say something like, wow, how's your ands doing?
Yeah.
Did you tone your vagus nerve today? Can we hum together before we continue this conversation? Those are the types of little worlds that I live in my free time.
Yeah, well, and you have polished this art to where it is part of your daily behavior. It is part of who you are, and is part of your experience that you go through regularly. The rest of us, we got to try to remember to do this. I have a post that says, be mindful. And, you know, I got to remind myself to stop throughout my day and pay attention to who I am and where I am, and then what's the moment, and how am I feeling, and et cetera. So again, I appreciate you always doing this, but I think by doing these exercises, one thing it gives us, which we often feel we don't have, and that is control. Think about that. The moment where I have to inhale for 2 seconds, hold for 4, and exhale for 8, I'm having to control something. It gives me a sense of control, right? And when you feel you're in control, you can achieve all kinds of things. You know, the whole point of your topic today was success, right? And you can only be successful when you feel you have some level of control. And if it's even controlling your breath, that's such a great place to start, with showing that you can be in control of what happens. I often think of, when we hear of fight and flight, I did always think, well, there is a third one. You know, you might not fight and you might not flight. Some people have learned helplessness. In other words, they do nothing. They neither fight or flight. They just stay in it, right? Maybe abusive scenarios can be like that, right? But you come up with, I've never heard this. If it's very popular, then I apologize. But the word freeze now, which basically is don't do anything, the learned helplessness. So it's either fight, flight, or flee, or freeze. And I actually think freeze sometimes can be the worst scenario of all. But your concept of, once you also break these states down, you come up with 2 more states whenever you can combine some. And you get benefits from actually combining the positives of states and being aware of how to use those. That's the trick. While we say this stuff is somewhat unconscious, there is a fine line probably between it being unconscious and us thinking about it and gaining some conscious control, where you can say your heart rate and your breathing is unconscious, but you can easily change your heart rate and breathing by doing these things. So you can control some of the unconscious by being conscious of it, which again, I think is important when you're trying to get back to a state of homeostasis. You mentioned that we should all make sure we're driving in all of those lanes. Right. I am curious, what happens when there's a traffic jam? You know, does that ever happen? Do we ever, like, we're too busy in all the lanes, maybe?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. Well, remember, the polyvagal theory is a theory. There's more and more research coming out about it all the time, but there are some, and this is on the Polyvagal Institute, some researchers will say, we're not sure about anatomically if this is right. And then people that are researching will say, this is what we know. But this idea of being stuck is such an important one. And Kevin, I just want to give a, true confession. I don't remember all the time to breathe either. Instead of a sticky note, I have a mindfulness bell app on my phone that literally has to remind me every 15 minutes to take a deep breath, because I don't do it intuitively, even though this is something that I'm immersed in.
Share that app, Heather, and I'll put that in the recording to say, if people want some technology to help, I do believe that's the trick. I did have written down here, be intentional.
Yeah.
And that's one way to be intentional, is you got to build this in your day. There's times in my day where I say, I literally have it, go outside.
Mm-hmm.
I just go stand outside for 5 or 10 minutes. I go water the lawn, or I just go stand and sit in a chair in the sun or something, and then come back in. I don't always do my breathing, which I think I should. I think the tremendous power there is the importance of oxygen. We do little deep, shallow breaths, and you never really replenish it. It's all little bitty puffs, and you're only getting a little bit of. Whereas when you do these deep breaths, you're emptying the bucket. You're putting in new oxygen. And even more importantly, one of our deans here reminded me of this one time. She does a lot of yoga, and she said, Kevin, the trick is not just getting in the new stuff. The trick is getting out the bad stuff. And they said, think of your body as a rag that you are wringing out water. And when you're wringing, she was doing yoga, so the twisting part is how she was using it. But the wringing is you're wringing out all that old bad oxygen, all those other pollutants and things that are in our blood and trapped inside of our muscles. And whenever you squeeze it and twist it and wring it, so to speak, then you get out all the old stuff. Well, deep breathing is sort of the same way. Not only are you bringing in fresh oxygen, but in those little cavities back in the corners by the stalactites and stuff in the back caves of your lungs, there are pockets, I bet, of just old, dead, sort of unrefreshed air. You know what I mean? That doesn't
you always paint such a vivid
have that
picture.
spring windows opened every once in a while. But I think whenever you do the breathing, like you say, it allows us to not only get in good stuff, but also get out the bad stuff. And that symbolically is even healthy. You know?
Yes, and I want to add on to a little bit of what you said, and again, piggyback off Dr. Beeman's presentation from Monday is this idea of being stuck, a traffic jam, to really, really encourage feelings of empathy for yourself. When you go stand outside for 5 minutes or do your deep breathing, you're like, I feel a little bit better, but not much. I'm still feeling really stuck, that there's no reason to suffer. There are therapies out there, there are groups, there are modalities that can help you tone your vagus nerve. And, you know, a lot of research is out there related to the stigma. Seeking mental health services can sometimes be stigmatized. And we don't think twice if we sprain an ankle to go to the doctor, or if our heart is doing something funky, we do not think twice. In fact, people would think we were irresponsible if we didn't care for our human body and bring it to the doctor. And I think that, or a professional who can help. And I think that when you think about things like the polyvagal theory in the ands as a way to explain these states that we're in, it really, I think, opens it up to being able to feel comfortable seeking help, because you can say, there's something not functioning with my ands. My vagus nerve isn't toned. These are things that I can get help with versus, I don't know why I'm depressed. There's no reason I should be depressed, or I don't know why I'm having these anxiety attacks and feeling very negative about yourself. So I think, again, one of the things I love most about this theory is the empathy it allows us to have for ourselves and others.
That's a very good point, Dr. Frederick, that we won't pause to go check on a physical imbalance. My foot hurts, my heart skipped a beat, something like that, right? I got pain. But we will neglect our mental balance. And I actually think we also neglect our emotional balance many times, because you're not allowed to really share your emotions. It's a weakness, right? People will see your vulnerabilities and all this stuff. So we probably trap that stuff in as well, which causes other ripple effects with health long-term. So it's, I think
if you just look at her lane change idea, I think that's a great visual. You're just changing lanes. You realize you're in the red zone. You don't want to be in the red zone. So you're taking an off ramp. I mean, how much gentler does that say than, oh, I'm going getting psychiatric help, you know? I mean, maybe it's the way we frame it. I loved your imagery of, I'm changing lanes. I've tried to do it myself, and now I'm gonna take an off ramp and get some help.
You know, part of the struggle here is if you're not imbalanced, then we consider you abnormal, right? You get thrown into this group of abnormality. And so it's really, when we talk about probably mental illness, the best way is to talk about not as an abnormality or emotional imbalance, whatever, but as a normality. We all will have moments where we will feel stuck. We will all have moments when we are tense, right? But it's to what degree does that interfere with your ability to cope? I do remember Jennifer and Nina on their presentation on Monday, they talked about the continuum of care. And so some, depending on the level of, you know, I don't want to call it illness, but imbalance, there are certain treatments that are more milder, let's call it, right? Less invasive and don't require severe, you know, more therapeutic interventions. And some of the simpler things, like what Heather was saying, that we can have control of. You know, if you have neurotransmitter imbalances and you need medicine, Sometimes the breathing activities are not the solution. They can help, but your real issue is there's an imbalance of a chemical somewhere that can be fixed with medicine. So I think the important thing is just be aware. Be aware of how you feel and be aware of others, and do something. If you need more intense help, there are those services available. Don't let it fester. But there are also some simple things that we can do to try to not get to that state of extreme imbalance, and being aware of our autonomic systems and how our bodies respond with fight and flight and freeze and safety and fear and etc. Explains a lot. It explains a lot of how we respond daily, because these systems that Heather just talked about have been around since the beginning of the creation of nervous systems, and they're designed for a reason. They predated our ability to have, thought and reflect on the existence of these systems. So they are primitive, and they're there to do something very specific. And when they're instinctual like that, it's kind of hard to always be in control of something so primitive, right? But you can be, as long as you're aware of the moment. And again, I think that's the first step to anything. Last couple minutes, anything else, Heather, that you would like to just sort of share for the crowd?
No, I just want to say I did love, Nina, the way you said, hey, I'm going to change lanes, and again, I would just like to encourage people to kind of put on the polyvagal lenses, the glasses, when you're out there in the world, when you're in your classroom, and use it to help you understand why people may be behaving the way they are, to usher in that empathy so that you can maybe offer them some suggestions in love. Humming with a partner is really, really powerful. Humming in a classroom is something that I wish everyone could experience. It's amazing to see how the harmonics, everyone ends up harmonizing usually by the third to fifth hum. So if you're an educator and this is something that is resonating with you, that you would feel comfortable doing, I think it would be great to just, again, share these simple techniques that really are support. Like you said, Kevin, they're support. They're going to help. It may not be all that you need, but in this day and age, gone are the days where we say, hey, a significant portion of the population experiences trauma or chronic stress. At this point, we can pretty much say globally, humans have experienced trauma and chronic stress. So we're navigating in a different social context here. And I think if we all come together and pay attention to our vagus nerves and the health of our ands, that we can create a better world. So on that note,
namaste, right? I will say that I think, unfortunately, the state of affairs that our world has been in the past couple of years with these anxiety levels, when you don't have a break from that stuff, then again, you consider that now to be normal. And you get used to performing in that state of unhealthiness. So let's just always be careful, again, to be aware of yourself and those of others. Thank you again, Dr. Frederick. I'll put the recording up on the Colloquium website. Thank you all for attending. We will have 2 more presentations today, one by Dr. Dunn, who will also talk about success, and he's going to be looking specifically at the doctoral students. And then we also have Dr. Daniel Zimmerman, who is the Dean of the School of Business and Technology. And he's going to be talking about a revision of his 7 Anchors book and how those 7 anchors can also help promote success in your life. So we'll hope to see you later today. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Stay safe, everybody. Thanks.